Tonight on ABC News Live Prime, national outrage over yet another civilian shot to death by federal agents in Minneapolis as President Trump and Governor Walz try to ease tensions. The chilling video of the shooting taken by horrified bystanders seen across the country. Agents firing 10 shots in 5 seconds. 37-year-old Alex Pretti, a registered nurse, hit multiple times. Tonight we go frame by frame to look at how this unfolded as the Trump administration faces bipartisan backlash.
I'm Trevor Alt reporting from Minneapolis. President Trump and Governor Tim Walz spoke on the phone earlier today. What we know about that conversation in 2 critical court hearings that are underway that could put a halt to the administration's immigration enforcement efforts here in Minneapolis.
And our conversation with a former ICE chief of staff about protocol training and recruitment.
The death toll rising from that crippling winter storm, hundreds of thousands without power, and the sub-zero wind chills moving in. I'm Whit Johnson reporting from New York tonight.
Thousands of flights canceled, people stranded trying to find their way home. I'm Gio Benitez at JFK Airport tonight, watching how the weather has impacted travel all across the country.
And no relief in sight. The brutal cold now here for the long haul. Temperatures below freezing for nearly 2 weeks. Our chief meteorologist, Ginger Z, times it all out. Olympic snowboarder turned alleged drug kingpin Ryan Wedding makes his first court appearance since his arrest. The stage is set for Super Bowl 60, a long-awaited rematch between the Patriots and the Seahawks.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. We begin this Monday night with the growing backlash after the killing of 37-year-old ICU nurse Alex Pretti that has left Minneapolis reeling and the country on edge. Tonight, the president appears to be making new efforts to ease the tension. Late today, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey said that he spoke with the president and says that the president agreed the present situation cannot continue. Multiple sources tell ABC News the man at the center of the immigration crackdown in Minnesota, Greg Bovino, could be leaving Minneapolis as early as tomorrow. Meanwhile, Trump administration officials continue to offer contradicting statements about just what happened. We'll have a frame-by-frame analysis of the moments before, during, and after the shots were fired so you can determine for yourself. More than 24 Republicans in Congress have come out asking for an independent investigation into the shooting. Democrats are threatening a government shutdown, in fact, over ICE funding. Tonight, Pretti's parents say they are heartbroken and very angry, calling Alex a kind-hearted soul and someone who wanted to make a difference in the world. They say his last thought and act was to protect a woman and called him a hero. Many questions remain tonight about just what happened and what comes next. We have team coverage tonight. We'll hear from the former director of ICE in a moment. But first, Trevor Alt leads us off from Minneapolis. Hi, Trevor.
Well, Lindsay, today we saw a demonstrative shift in tone from the Trump administration in response to this shooting, and it comes, and of course, tensions have been incredibly high on the ground in Minneapolis. Protesters trekking down hotels where Border Patrol agents are believed to have been staying, and now there could be some major shifts in immigration enforcement right here in Minneapolis, as of course, so much of the world is focused on the shooting death of Alex Pretti.
Tonight, tensions soaring in Minneapolis after the second deadly shooting of an American citizen by federal agents this month. Late today, sources telling ABC News Border Patrol Commander-at-Large Greg Bovino, along with some Border Patrol agents, are expected to leave Minneapolis as early as tomorrow. Bovino, seen in recent days tossing a smoke grenade into an unruly crowd, he's been the face of immigration enforcement operations in the city for weeks. Border Czar Tom Homan is now being sent in by President Trump. The move comes amid growing scrutiny and serious questions over what really happened in the fatal shooting of an ICU nurse who worked at the VA, 37-year-old Alex Pretti. Tonight, DHS says they're now reviewing body camera video which captured the shooting from multiple angles. So far, the public has not seen it. What it has seen is this.
They shot that guy.
Tonight, a frame-by-frame analysis of eyewitness video. At 8:58 a.m. Saturday, 37-year-old Alex Pretti is seen holding his phone, apparently attempting to record federal agents as they make an arrest. At no point does he appear to be holding a gun. The situation escalates with officers approaching Pretti. An agent can then be seen shoving a woman into Pretti. You can see the two holding onto each other as agents move in. an agent then pushing another woman to the ground. It appears that nurse, Alex Pretti, tries to help the woman and is then pepper sprayed by agents as he moved in to shield her. Both of Alex Pretti's hands are visible, one holding onto his phone, the other hand held up, appearing to try to shield himself from the pepper spray. Several agents swarm in, tackling Pretti to the ground, and it escalates further. Another group of officers surround him, pinning him down, appearing to strike him multiple times. At 9:01 a.m., you see a federal officer in a gray jacket appear to reach near Pretti's waistband, pulling out a gun that Pretti had a permit to carry. 1 second later, the first shot is fired. You can see some officers stepping back. In the next 5 seconds, 9 more shots. Onlookers horrified.
What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? Oh my!
Soon after, an officer is heard saying, "I got the gun." Alex Pretti's body lying in the street. He died at the scene.
What did you just do?
Millions of Americans have now seen the images. These were the first words from Secretary Kristi Noem after news broke that another American citizen had been killed.
An individual approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The officers attempted to disarm this individual, but the armed suspect reacted violently.
She described it this way.
This looks like a situation where an individual arrived at this scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement.
Alex Pretti's parents call the administration's claims lies, saying in a statement, "The sickening lies told about our son by the administration are reprehensible and disgusting," adding about their son, "He was a good man." In court documents, a doctor who treated Alex Pretti at the scene says agents shot Pretti at least 6 or 7 times, adding the victim had at least 3 bullet wounds in his back, an additional gunshot wound on the victim's upper left chest, and another possible gunshot wound on his neck. Another witness saying it didn't look like he was trying to resist. 4 or 5 agents had him on the ground, and they just started shooting him. According to a court filing, the FBI has collected Pretti's phone and handgun as evidence. State officials immediately demanding their own investigation into the shooting.
Thank God we have video, because according to DHS, these 7 heroic guys took an onslaught of a battalion against them or something. It's nonsense, people. It is nonsense, and it's lies.
Tonight, Governor Walz now says he had a conversation with President Trump and called it productive, saying the president would look into reducing the number of federal agents that have been surged into the state. A key part of the investigation will be about that handgun that Pretti had a permit to carry. The administration defending their actions over the weekend.
They responded according to their training and took action to defend the officer's life and those of the public around him. And I don't know of any peaceful protester that shows up with a gun and ammunition rather than a sign. This is a violent riot when you have someone showing up with weapons and are using them to assault law enforcement officers.
Today, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying of the president, there is no greater supporter or defender of the Second Amendment.
So while Americans have a constitutional right to bear arms, Americans do not have a constitutional right to impede lawful immigration enforcement operations. And any gun owner knows that when you are carrying a weapon, when you are bearing arms, and you are confronted by law enforcement, you are raising the assumption of risk and the risk of force being used against you.
Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara on ABC News Live today, weighing in on the right to carry a weapon in Minnesota.
And every indication that we have is that this is a person who is lawfully permitted to be armed in a public space. So I think because those constitutional rights are being implicated here, I think it raises some significant questions, which the investigation would address. But I think it's something that is a serious concern for a lot of people.
Tonight, Alex Pretti's family and friends are mourning.
We remember and give thanks.
Pretti seen in this moment on the job at the VA hospital, reading the final salute for a fallen veteran.
Today we remember that freedom is not free. We have to work at it, nurture it, protect it, and even sacrifice for it.
Pretti's father telling the AP his son protested because he was upset with the ICE crackdown.
He cared about people deeply, and he was very upset with what was happening in Minneapolis and throughout the United States with ICE, as millions of other people are upset.
Death prompting even more anger. Trevor Ault joins us once again from Minneapolis. And Trevor, I understand officials are reviewing a key piece of this puzzle. What can you tell us about that?
So in addition, of course, to reviewing the videos that have now been seen across the entire world, Lindsay, they are reviewing those body camera videos as well. But what we're told from sources is that this is going to be a broad investigation into the shooting. They also, however, want a judge to remove a temporary order that is requiring the Trump administration to save all the evidence in the shooting. They argue they were already saving all that evidence, but local officials argue the Trump administration can't be trusted to preserve the evidence in this shooting. Lindsay?
And Trevor, just give us a sense of what's happening behind you. It sounds like additional peaceful protests.
Yeah, so this is the scene of the shooting here. You can see that there are people, they're gathered in a circle because the memorial has grown so much in size. It has been very quiet here. They've reopened the streets, so you notice that there is still traffic going through. It has been very calm this evening, and I can tell you, while it is, of course, very cold, you see what everyone is wearing. That hasn't stopped people from really coming out. We did see some tense moments with demonstrators outside a hotel last night where they believe that Border Patrol agents were staying, but here at the memorial, of course, this is much less a protest and much more people grieving and in mourning. I saw one person out here with a tear frozen on his face. Lindsay.
Trevor Ault, thank you so much. And let's bring in our senior investigative reporter, Aaron Katursky, to discuss this further. And Aaron, the first question, as we heard in Trevor's report, of course, the FBI does now have possession of Pretti's phone. How could his recordings on his personal phone perhaps shed more light into the investigation?
Assuming, Lindsay, he was recording, when we see him holding up his phone, it could help us understand whether the Customs and Border Protection officers involved in his deadly shooting were responding to an actual threat, or did they act out of anger? Did Pretti say anything to agitate them? Did he even mention that he was carrying a gun, which he had a permit to lawfully carry? And the phone, in theory, could have been rolling while there's that scrum on the ground. Did it pick up any audio? Did it pick up any conversation? Did it pick up anything that could perhaps shed further light on what occurred?
And of course, Minnesota state officials have demanded their own investigation here. But would they even be able to locally hold a federal agent responsible?
That's a challenge. And in theory, Minnesota has not foreclosed on that possibility. But Lindsay, it would be difficult. Federal law enforcement officers enjoy some degree of immunity from local prosecution. Minnesota authorities may want to try. They may want some avenue to try and hold the federal officers accountable if the investigation that the state is now conducting deems it worthy. But it's really difficult to see how that would happen. We should also say that the officers involved in the deadly shooting, according to senior officials, have been reassigned to other states. They're not even working in Minnesota anymore.
So it would be up to the federal government to hold that officer potentially responsible.
In all likelihood, the best avenue for accountability would be with the very same federal agencies that are now under scrutiny.
All right, Aaron Katursky, so appreciate your insight as always. For more now, we're joined by former ICE Chief of Staff Jason Hauser. Mr. Hauser, we thank you so much for joining us. Given the increasing tensions surrounding ICE operations in Minneapolis and across the country, really, I think many would be curious to know a little bit about the onboarding process, what it takes to become an ICE agent. Can you just walk us through what the requirements are in order to become an officer and what training looks like for them?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I mean, typical ICE training over decades has been extremely rigorous, whether that's as a deportation officer or as a Homeland Security Investigation Special Agent. It has always been between 12 to 16 weeks of intense training at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Facility. But it's a mirror of, it's a multiple different types of skill sets. It's everything from understanding the law and immigration authorities under Title VIII. It's also about understanding the rules of probable cause and enforcement, and also carrying out the duties of just sort of the management, administrative, and processing of individuals, bringing them into custody, doing it in a humane, just manner. But over the last few months, the administration has taken a course to collapsing a lot of that training down to, as reporting has shown, somewhere between 40 and 50 days. And some of it, as they've concluded, is on-the-job training that they're actually doing in the field offices. That can be really concerning. And go ahead.
Do you think that the current training curriculum is enough, or what more would you like to see?
Well, let's just keep it to what we know, essentially what we've seen, coming to fruition in Minneapolis. I mean, the situation that we saw with Mr. Pretti is those environments were extremely intense. The environments are very pressurized. Those operations are abnormal, whether that be for CBP doing domestic civil immigration enforcement, let alone for ICE officers. The idea that ICE officers could train for these sort of environments of going after non-criminal and these sweeps on the street, but also dealing with large protests and doing that in an operational environment were extremely strenuous on the officers themselves. You can imagine that these officers have not been trained to that. That has not been the typical operation and procedures of ICE or CBP over decades. So the idea that these officers, after being on these operations for days and hours in these intense situations, dealing with the weather and the sort of the blowback, there's no way that these officers could be trained to that. There's handbooks and procedures, there's best practices across federal law enforcement that should be followed, and there needs to be a constant review of these training procedures.
As ICE operations around the country have ramped up, we've seen ICE officers covering their faces. Why are they wearing masks? Is that unusual for law enforcement? It seems like even undercover agents in other departments show their face.
Yeah, I mean, it shows to me that these officers are being put in the environment and in the operations directed by their leadership and their command, where they know that the people in the communities and in the public, there's going to be blowback. There is risk to officers. Officers must be protected. But we have to ask ourselves, what is in the public safety interest? Is these sort of operations meeting the national security and public safety needs of our community and our country? Clearly, they're not. ICE and immigration enforcement, whether there's the agency of ICE, there will always be immigration management and enforcement, and we need to carry that out, focusing on national security and public safety threats. I mean, that's the thing, is just in my experience as the chief of staff of ICE during the Biden administration, these are the same officers that we were detailing to the border to humanely process when we were seeing border surges across the Southwest. They have a very challenging job, but putting them in these environments that are not truly meeting the sort of even the goals of this administration is a bit ridiculous.
So in the case of the death of Alex Pretti over the weekend, based on the videos that you've seen, can you tell us what seemed to go wrong?
Anytime you have a use of force, or for an ICE instance where someone may die in custody, there's always multi-pronged, unbiased, arbitrary sort of multi-agency reviews. That starts internally within ICE or CBP, within the Office of Professional Responsibility, the Inspector General, local and state authorities, other federal law enforcement agencies, even nonprofits in a lot of regards, in my experience, look at these sort of events. What I see on the ground is a very chaotic environment, and the questions need to be asked just not in the incident itself of this gentleman's death, but the hours before, operationally and tactically on the ground. They also need to look at what was the legal authorities, what were the officers, what was this operation, why were they carrying it out, what was the direction from their command. All those things need to be evaluated, and clearly on the ground, there's at least 9 to 10 officers not responding with lethal force, and one officer that predicates the use of the weapon did use force. What was the justification of that? So at all levels of these sort of operations need to be reviewed thoroughly and unbiasedly.
Do you think that there's a chance that ICE can regain public trust?
There's a need within our immigration system, especially when we have 14 million people in the immigration docket. There will always be a need for immigration enforcement and management. And that needs to be carried out in a humane, just way, focused on the individuals that have taken advantage of a broken immigration system, that do want to do us harm. That is when Americans applaud the work of our immigration enforcement officers. We need to get back to that focused on keeping our community safe. But at the same time, we cannot sort of live in a world where we don't have accountability within the system, but we can do that in a humane, just way. But there's two things affecting this situation: politics. Why were these operations happening in Minnesota? but also the fact that sort of we have an immigration system that is broken. And there's accountability here on the backs of Congress and the leaderships that have been directing these operations.
Jason Hauser, so appreciate your insight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
President Trump is facing growing scrutiny within his own party over the role of ICE agents in his immigration crackdown, some even demanding an investigation. This as the president sends immigration czar Tom Homan to Minnesota to oversee ICE operations instead of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. ABC's Mary Bruce reports from the White House.
Tonight, President Trump facing a rare and growing backlash from members of his own party. Some big-name Republicans, including the governor of Texas, now urging him to, quote, recalibrate his immigration crackdown. Others denouncing the administration's rush to judgment after federal officers killed Alex Pretti.
He was there to perpetuate violence.
Even as the country watched video of Pretti's killing, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem quick to accuse him of domestic terrorism. The president labeling him a gunman. Deputy White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller calling Pretti an assassin, a comment reposted by Vice President J.D. Vance. But tonight, the conservative editorial board of the Wall Street Journal writing bluntly, the Trump administration's spin on this simply isn't believable. The conservative New York Post writing, Mr. President, the American people didn't vote for these scenes, and you can't continue to order them to not believe their lying eyes. Texas Senator Ted Cruz saying the administration's tone should be more measured.
Immediately when an incident like this happens, they come out guns blazing that we took out a violent terrorist. Hooray. Escalating the rhetoric doesn't help, and it actually loses credibility.
Today, I asked the White House.
Secretary Noem said Alex Pretti committed an act of domestic terrorism. Stephen Miller labeled Pretti a domestic terrorist. Does the president agree with that?
Look, as I've said, I have not heard the president characterize Mr. Pretti in that way. However, I have heard the president say he wants to let the facts in the investigation lead itself.
Tonight, at least 29 Republican members of Congress demanding a full investigation. And conservative Texas Governor Greg Abbott says it's time for the White House to recalibrate their immigration enforcement tactics.
Go about their job in a more structured way to make sure that they are going to be able to remove these people without causing all the kinds of problems and fighting in communities that they are experiencing right now.
Our thanks to Mary Bruce. And now to the deadly winter storm and the brutal cold, which is expected to last for days. The death toll is rising as hundreds of thousands are now without power. And there's a new storm that we're already tracking. Ginger Z has the forecast in a moment. Gio will look at the travel headaches for millions of Americans. But first, Whit Johnson reports.
Tonight, the death toll rising from that powerful winter storm that cut a 2,000-mile devastating path of snow and ice across the U.S. Snowfall rates of up to 2 inches per hour in parts of New York City, totaling more than 11 inches, the most in nearly 5 years. We were out on the streets of New York today.
Take a look at the conditions right now. The plows have done a pretty good job clearing the roads, but you can see the side streets especially are still very slick with slush and ice. Officials are urging folks to stay home, stay off the roads so that crews can do their work.
Snow blowing right through the open doors of this deserted commuter train on Long Island. Families opening doors to huge drifts in Marlboro, New York.
Ooh-wee.
The suburbs digging out for more than a foot.
I was expecting a lot, but I didn't think it was going to live up to it, and it did more than that.
Outside Boston, plow crews battling a whopping 22 inches of snow in Sterling, Massachusetts, the most in the state.
Our guys love when we're the jackpot. They kind of take a lot of pride in what we do. We're prepared for it. You know, we would rather be plowing 20 inches, I think, than 2 inches at a time a bunch of times.
Giant snow melters getting rid of tons of snow in Philadelphia. More than 9 inches there, the city's biggest snowfall in 10 years. In Louisville, officers digging out this driver, pushing him down the road. Across the South, freezing rain and ice thick enough to take down huge trees.
Oh no, oh no, oh no!
Heather Macaprang watching as this one came crashing down. And in Nashville on icy Interstate 65, a big rig crashing into an overhead sign, causing it to collapse and shutting down part of the highway. Hundreds of thousands losing power across the storm zone. These power lines arcing south of Nashville in Franklin. Our Victor Okendo is there.
This entire neighborhood is under snow and ice. Almost everyone here is without power. You can see this large tree. It came crashing down. It snapped and brought some power lines down with it. But now these crews are on scene working to restore power.
And in Oxford, Mississippi, conditions so treacherous, utility crews were pulled back overnight over fears of falling trees. Authorities issuing a shelter-in-place order. Mississippi's governor confirming at least 2 weather-related deaths in that state.
And Lindsay, with the wind chill, it will feel like below zero across much of the Northeast tomorrow morning. And that same dangerous freeze in the south, where hundreds of thousands of people will be waking up without power. Lindsay?
Let's get right to ABC's chief meteorologist Ginger Z to tell us more about that brutal Arctic blast moving in and the potential for another storm. Say it's not so, Ginger.
Yes. Lindsay, tonight it's that type of cold that makes your head hurt. Wind chills 4, and this for New York and Philadelphia is the longest stretch of sub-freezing temperatures that we've seen since at least 2018. We're kind of in the heart of it, but we're not alone. There are extreme cold warnings all the way back to the Gulf Coast, to Houston, Little Rock, and that's the problem, is that tomorrow morning, some of these places that lost power, like northern Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee, they will be sub-freezing for wind chills. Now, we will see some rebound by the afternoon to just above the freezing mark, but it's going to take a lot more to melt a full inch of ice on some of those power lines and trees. So this is going to be a slow go, because it's not going to be long that the warmth is here. We're going to have another plunge of deep cold air all the way to South Florida through the weekend. We're not going to rebound much at all, and we're watching the potential for another storm along the East Coast. So we will bring you the latest there. But truly, I was trying to watch that freezing mark, and if we don't hit it next Monday or Tuesday here in New York, it'll be another week after that. So this is climatologically the coldest time of year, and boy, it's coming through this year.
It is delivering. All right. Ginger Z for us. Thanks so much, Zen. The storm is potentially to blame for a deadly plane crash in Bangor, Maine. Authorities say the 6 people on board are presumed dead. The plane crashed while taking off in bad weather. And tonight, airlines are reporting thousands of cancellations. So when will the system finally get back to normal? Gio Benitez reports from JFK Airport in New York City.
Federal investigators are combing this frigid and icy runway tonight after this private jet, now covered in snow, crashed while taking off in the middle of that major snowstorm.
All traffic is stopped on the field. All traffic is stopped on the field.
Around 7:45 p.m. Sunday, a Bombardier Challenger 600 carrying 6 people on board was speeding down the runway in low visibility at Bangor International Airport. The NTSB says preliminary information shows that the plane crashed upon departure and caught fire after the crash. All 6 people died on board.
Aircraft upside down. We have a passenger aircraft upside down.
It comes on the heels of one of the worst days for cancellations in U.S. history. Layers of ice, sleet, and snow blanketing runways from the south to the northeast, creating travel chaos over the weekend.
And this is the story at so many airports right now. Plows working overtime to clear those runways since the storm began. Even so, you still have so much snow and ice.
More than 20,000 flights canceled since Friday. Major hubs in Dallas, New York, and Boston slowly getting back online.
Still several days until things are back to normal. Our thanks to Gio for that. Former Canadian Olympic snowboarder Ryan Wedding made his first court appearance in California court today. The 44-year-old FBI fugitive pleaded not guilty to the 2 indictments against him in a federal courtroom. Wedding turned himself into authorities at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City last week. He faces charges that he allegedly ran a $1 billion international drug trafficking ring and arranged multiple killings. Wedding's trial is set to start on March 24th. Still ahead, the Super Bowl matchup. It is set, folks. We're hanging with Herm to see who has the edge going into a Seahawks-Patriots showdown. Plus, we continue to watch that Arctic blast sweeping across the country. Who should be on high alert in the coming days? The next tensions remain high after another deadly shooting in Minneapolis by a federal agent. John Cohen is assessing the threat. Coming up. Welcome back, everyone. Tensions have reached a boiling point in Minneapolis after federal agents shot and killed a second U.S. citizen, this time on Saturday. The Trump administration says 37-year-old Alex Pretti approached the officers with a gun and the intent to attack. But ABC News analysis of multiple videos appears to contradict those claims. Let's bring in ABC News contributor and former Homeland Security Acting Secretary for Intelligence, John Cohen, for more on this. So, John, by now, we've all seen the videos. We've broken down the angles frame by frame. It seems like the government is essentially saying, don't believe what your own eyes see, which is leading some to not trust what federal agencies say. Tell us about the dangers of a society that loses trust in the federal government.
Yeah, Lindsay, if the public does not have confidence that law enforcement is operating legally and ethically, objectively, and in a non-discriminatory manner, if the public doubts information that comes from law enforcement, it can have very serious results. People will be less likely to provide law enforcement information about crimes they've witnessed or crimes that they were the victim of. They are less likely to comply with lawful orders, whether it's a police officer telling someone to act a certain way, or when law enforcement or other government officials tell people to evacuate at the scene of an emergency. They are much more likely to demonstrate violently or with destructive behavior when something happens or the law enforcement agency behaves in a way that they disagree with. So if we work really hard in law enforcement to make sure that the public can trust us and they have confidence in us, and what we're seeing increasingly is that trust and confidence is eroding.
And looking big picture here, what are the ramifications of situations like this continuing to happen?
What the implications are, or the potential is, that we're going to see more protests, and we're going to see state and locals having to make a choice of either continuing to cooperate with the federal government or focus on protecting the communities they serve. And if the relationship between federal law enforcement and its state and local colleagues erodes, then you're going to see increases in crime.
In your career, you've been in these types of tense situations. You've seen and used both lethal and non-lethal force to arrest people. What would you advise DHS, ICE, and other federal agencies now that it has gotten to this point?
Yeah, they need to take a hard look at how they're conducting their operations. In the words of Governor Abbott from Texas, the administration and DHS in particular needs to recalibrate its enforcement operations, focus more on targeting violent criminals, focus much less on random patrols and subject and vehicle stops, particularly when they don't have reasonable suspicion to believe that a person is undocumented in violation of the Immigration and Naturalization Act. They should find more opportunities to work with their local colleagues. Focus on violent criminals. I have not met a police chief or a sheriff anywhere in the United States that wouldn't gladly work with the federal government to target violent gang members, drug traffickers, and other, terrorists and other violent criminals jointly in enforcement action. Focus on those activities. The locals are not going to work or are going to be reticent to engage or support civil immigration activities. But what they can do is make sure that they are notifying ICE when a person who is in local custody is subject to removal. Take seriously and objectively review allegations of excessive force or other inappropriate activity. And even if those reviews simply result in administrative change or training, which is something the department should be looking at very seriously based on the behaviors that we've seen in cities across the country by ICE and CBP personnel, that can help instill confidence. And then finally, tone down the rhetoric. No one's going to want to cooperate with you if you call them an insurrectionist, radical, or a domestic terrorist, and be accurate in the information that you provide the public.
John Cohen, appreciate your time as always. Thank you. Coming up, the body of the last Israeli hostage in Gaza is recovered. What Israeli officials are saying will happen next. And we continue to monitor the Arctic blast sweeping across the country. We'll break down what you need to know by the numbers. Stay with us. Welcome back to Prime. Here's a look at the stories making headlines right now. Tensions are high in Minneapolis after the second deadly shooting of a civilian by federal agents this month. 37-year-old Alex Pretti was shot and killed Saturday morning in an incident caught on video. President Trump said today that he and Governor Tim Walz discussed working together on simmering tensions. Much of the country is still dealing with the aftermath of the major winter storm that hit over the weekend. Hundreds of thousands remain without power across 10 states, and more than 5,000 flights have been canceled as of late this afternoon. At least 29 storm-related deaths have also been reported. Israeli officials say the body of the last remaining hostage from the October 7, 2023 attack by Hamas has been returned to Israel. The body of Ron Gavili was found in a cemetery in northern Gaza. Gavili served in the Israeli Police Special Forces and died in combat during the attack. His recovery means that there are now no more Israeli hostages dead or alive in Gaza for the first time in more than a decade. And starting tomorrow, Southwest airline flights will officially have assigned seats. The airline announced the change to its seating policy in July and allowed customers to start choosing their own seats on flights scheduled for tomorrow and beyond. Southwest is the last major U.S. carrier to adopt assigned seating. Coming up, we look at the numbers behind this weekend's major winter storm and speak to an expert on how to safely get back out on the roads. And Apple is introducing a new generation of AirTags. We'll tell you about the new advanced features coming up. Welcome back, everyone. Of course, we've been reporting on the massive winter storm, which slammed much of the country with heavy snow, sleet, and freezing rain. Now, as millions of Americans in the Northeast, South, and the Plains try to clean up from that storm, they're also dealing with a wave of brutal cold. Let's take a look at this storm by the numbers. At least 20 states ended up declaring states of emergency leading up to this storm. 10 to 20 inches of snow fell across the plains and into the Northeast, with some individual areas reporting higher totals. More than 1 million customers in the South were reportedly without power on Sunday afternoon. That number has since gone down, fortunately. The storm, though, has made travel a nightmare, with more than 20,000 flights canceled just since Friday, and that includes more than 11,000 flights canceled on Sunday alone. Tragically, at least 29 weather-related deaths have been reported in areas hit by the storm. That's according to the Associated Press. And while the precipitation may have ended, the harsh winter weather has not, as more than 200 million Americans from Texas into the Northeast are on alert for dangerous cold. Some areas saw their highest snowfall totals in years. New York Central Park received more than 11 inches, which was its biggest snowfall since 2022. Meanwhile, Philadelphia saw its highest snowfall in a decade, reporting just over 9 inches of snow. For more now on how to get back out on the roads after this storm with the brutal cold, we're joined by Cheryl Nelson, a natural disaster and travel preparedness expert. Thank you so much for joining us. The storm is over, but with this brutal cold setting in, what kind of road conditions should people be expecting and watching out for as they venture out?
Yeah. Hi, Lindsay. Thanks so much for having me on. And you're right. Just because the snow is over, it does not mean it is safe to go outside. We are dealing with prolonged cold temperatures across much of the eastern and central part of the United States. And there's so many things that you have to watch out for. First, you have to start at home and getting your vehicle ready, because if your vehicle is parked outside, it's probably covered in snow or ice if you live in many of the cities that got snow, unless you were parked in a garage. And the mistake that people make before they hit the road is that they don't clear the snow off the entire vehicle. Yes, I'm talking the roof as well. I say this because once you get going, that could be snow or it could be a block of ice. The last thing you want is that flying at the passenger behind you, or if you're in that car, that coming through your windshield. You can get a ticket for that too. So that's just one of the things to do before you start driving. Another one is to check your tire pressure. For every 10 degrees that the temperature drops, you lose 1 psi in tire pressure. You want adequate pressure to maintain that grip with the roadways. Also check your fluids, make sure they are filled in your car and everything looks good there. Windshield washer fluid, have that, fill it up, have an extra bottle in your car, and make sure it's the kind that really can withstand the super cold temperatures. Those are the things you want to do before you even start getting on the road.
All right, some really good tips there. How long should people anticipate dealing with hazardous roads with this combination of a winter storm followed by this extreme cold?
Yeah, well, I don't want to jinx anything, but what we're dealing with now, I mean, this prolonged cold in places like New York City, you may not get above freezing all week. And then as we look into next weekend, there are early signs that there could be another coastal storm forming in the east and moving off the East Coast. Now, it's way too early to talk about specifics. It could stay off the sea, and not affect anybody, or we could be dealing with round 2. So really everything you wished you had for this winter storm, this might be the time to run out and get supplies just in case for the next one.
Word to the wise there. How long would it normally take for roads to get back to normal after a storm like this?
Well, primary roads, that can really depends on where you live. If you're in Syracuse, New York, I lived there for several years. They'll get it done the next day. They are on it. But if you are farther south, they just don't have the resources there. So it could take a couple days to get the primary roads. And then where I live in Norfolk, Virginia, they don't even plow the secondary roads. So you kind of just have to wait until that melts. And we're dealing with prolonged cold in some places. Some of these roads may not get plowed, and it may be sitting there for a while if you are in an area that got a lot of snow.
Cheryl Nelson, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And coming up, actress Sydney Sweeney is facing scrutiny for a recent publicity stunt at the Hollywood sign. We'll tell you what happened. And it's Patriots versus Seahawks for Super Bowl 60. ESPN's Herm Edwards recaps championship weekend and looks ahead to the big game. Is actress Sydney Sweeney in trouble for hanging bras from the iconic Hollywood sign? Apple introduces new AirTags with more advanced features, and retailer Patagonia files suit against drag queen Patagonia for trademark infringement. These stories and more in tonight's rundown. As seen in video obtained by TMZ, the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce says actress Sydney Sweeney did not have a license nor permission to climb the iconic letters of the Hollywood sign and string bras across it. Sweeney pulled off the stunt to reportedly promote her new line of lingerie. The bras have since been removed. Today, Apple rolled out a new generation of AirTags designed to better help users find their most valued items. The updated AirTag features a longer tracking range, better precision, and a speaker that is 50% louder. The precision finding will also now work directly on Apple Watches, and travelers may benefit the most. Apple says it will partner with more than 50 airlines to help locate lost luggage using secure location sharing. 20-year-old American tennis star Lerner Tien has earned a trip to the Australian Open quarterfinals, becoming the youngest man to go so far in a Grand Slam event since 2002. He upset three-time Australian Open runner-up Daniil Medvedev in straight sets. Next up, Tien faces world number 3 Alexander Zverev, the runner-up in Melbourne last year. Meanwhile, defending Australian Open champion Madison Keys was knocked out in the 4th round, falling to fellow American Jessica Pegula. Outdoor apparel company Patagonia has sued drag queen and environmental activist Patagonia in a trademark infringement case, claiming the similar name could confuse consumers. The lawsuit, filed in California federal court, alleges Patagonia used the name on clothing and in environmental partnerships despite an agreement not to. Patagonia says it seeks just $1 in damages. Gold futures surged to a record high, trading over $5,000 per troy ounce. Spot gold also hit a new record of over $5,100 per troy ounce. One reason for the spike is the value of the U.S. dollar sliding to its lowest level in months. Analysts say concerns over global instability has also driven demand for gold. 7 Japanese-American soldiers, once labeled enemy aliens, are being promoted posthumously 8 decades after they died fighting for the United States during World War II. The 7 were students at the University of Hawaii and cadets in the Reserve Officer Training Corps, on track to become Army officers when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. The 7 will now be promoted to second lieutenant, the rank they would have earned if they had completed the Reserve Officer Training Corps program. Super Bowl 60 has been set as the Patriots and Seahawks won their respective conference games. And here to help us break down the Super Bowl in this week's edition of Hanging with Herm, none other than Coach Herm Edwards himself. Thank you so much, Coach, as always, for coming on. Let's start off with the NFC Championship game. Sam Darnold's Seahawks went up against a tough Rams defense who gave Darnold trouble in their last game. Yesterday, Darnold threw for 3 touchdowns, had no turnovers. Did his performance finally quiet all the doubters?
No doubt about it. And I think he's resurrected his career when you think about going to Seattle and people were questioning how is this team going to play with him playing quarterback. And he's done a marvelous job. And really, when you think about the division he plays in, the NFC West, probably the best division in football. When you think about just teams in that division, San Francisco, the Rams, obviously, who he just beat in the championship game. So he's having a tremendous season, and now he's trying to win a Super Bowl. How about that?
How about that? My friend Flavio in here does the sound. He's very upset he wasn't able to get it done when he was on the Jets. But moving on, the Rams had 2 opportunities within the final 10 minutes to take the lead, and they squandered both of them. Where did it go wrong for the Rams and Coach Sean McVay?
Well, I think the last month of play, if you watch the Rams, especially defensively, their secondary was really, really not very good. And that took place again yesterday. And that has kind of been something that I've witnessed the last month of play. This is why the stress on Stafford was every game it seemed like he had to score 30 or more points so they could win games. And this Seattle bunch was not going to allow that to happen. They have an outstanding defense. But the Rams secondary is a concern going into this offseason. They're going to have to do some things to fix it.
All right, let's jump to the AFC. Patriots won a nail-biter 10-7 in Denver. Game came down to 2 missed field goals by Denver as they battled the snow. But the Patriots defense had another dominating performance. What stood out to you about their performance?
Well, you're right. They had a dominant performance, and they played really good at the line of scrimmage, at the point of attack. Really did a nice job against the Denver Broncos. And you know, look, they're playing against a quarterback that hadn't a lot of experience at all, hadn't played a lot of games. But I thought what really hurt the Denver Broncos was the ability of Drake May to run the ball. He was their leading rusher. At times, he ran the ball against the Denver defense to keep the chains moving. It was kind of a unique situation. Every time they cleared the pocket, here he goes again. He ran it for a touchdown. He was their leading rusher, the quarterback. That's never good when the quarterback's your leading rusher. But in this game, it paid dividends for him, and this is why you see the New England Patriots headed to the Super Bowl.
How much of the Patriots' success, though, do you think was tied in the fact that Denver had to play their backup quarterback?
Well, a little bit of that, but this was a game that really, when you look at it, the Patriots were playing a young quarterback as well. So, they were in the game. The problem is the runs, the unannounced runs by Drake May really hurt the Denver Broncos, and they never adjusted to it.
Looking ahead to the Super Bowl, how does the Patriots defense look going up against the Seahawks offense and Sam Darnold?
Well, the Patriots have a good defense, but here's the situation that I look at when I watch the Seattle Seahawks. They played in a tougher division all season, and I think that is going to be the difference. And their defense is outstanding. The back end of their defense has really good corners that can cover. Obviously, Sam Darnold played turnover free. He played one of his cleanest games in a big game. Now, can he do it again against a Patriot defense that will bring pressure? They will pressure Sam Darnold to try to make him make some mistakes.
Hopefully you can come back on with us next week to really bring out the whiteboard and the X and O's and plays that each team needs to win. But if you're a betting man, who do you have for the Super Bowl?
Right now, I'm going to give a slight edge to the Seattle Seahawks.
All right.
I'm going to give them a slight edge right now. Yeah,
right.
Maybe only 3 points. Slight edge.
Okay. All right. Probably a nail biter then. Coach Herm, always appreciate you. Thanks so much, Coach.
Thank you.
And that is our show for this hour. I'm Lindsay Davis. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.